almost busted in Laredo, but for reasons that I'd rather not disclose.
I smoke pot, and I like it a lot. Hi, this is Willie Nelson. I learned a long time ago that marijuana is a lot safer to use than alcohol. There's absolutely nothing wrong with the responsible use of marijuana by adults. It's time we stopped arresting and started respecting responsible marijuana smokers in America. And to learn what you can do to help, please contact NORML at www.norml.org or call toll-free at 888-67-NORML.
The show was long and we were just sitting there, and we'd come to play and not just for the ride.
And distributed by the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws in Washington, D.C. This is your daily audio stash, the growing truth about cannabis. Welcome to the most popular audio podcast regarding marijuana in all of America and all the world, featuring interviews with scientists, politicians, doctors, prohibition policy activists, regular cannabis consumers, musicians, and NORML staff and NORML's board of directors, along with music and comedy no other podcast can offer. You can always find out more about the show at our website, normalaudiostash.com. We're ending marijuana prohibition with education, one listener at a time. Welcome back to the Audio Stash. Today it's Monday, July 2nd. I'm your host, Chris Goldstein. Take a moment to join us at NORML today to end marijuana prohibition in America. We can't do it without you, so make sure you join today at NORML.org. It's going to be a huge week here on the Audio Stash. We had Tommy last Friday. What a great interview with Tommy Chong talking about the Aspen Legal Seminars. We're going to have more of the audio from Aspen's legal seminars over the next couple of weeks right here on the Audio Stash, and look out for a new page featuring all the seminar audio we have separately on a new podcast in the next couple of weeks as well. This week here on the Stash, we got some great guests for you. Tomorrow here on the Audio Stash, we'll feature Allison Margolin. She's LA's dopest attorney. You can check her out at lasdopestattorney.com and on MySpace. We have links to her MySpace page on the NORML podcast profile up there. Allison's a young lawyer out there in Los Angeles specializing in drugs, weapons, and other charges. She has a particular focus on cannabis law, and she's got some interesting cases to discuss, and she's gaining a level of celebrity out there in Los Angeles on her own. Speaking of celebrities, on Friday, we've got Rick Steves, PBS travel host, NORML advisory board member, and globe-trotting citizen of the world. Rick is just a wonderful human being and is passionate about ending marijuana prohibition here in the United States. We interviewed Rick last year, and he just never fails to give a wonderful, just a great interview. We'll feature Rick on Friday this week. You can check out his website at ricksteves.com. Also on the Audio Stash this week, we'll feature an interview with the band Potluck. Those guys are a stellar hip-hop, marijuana-centered group from Humboldt County, California. We played a bunch of Potluck tracks here on the Audio Stash, and I've got a box of t-shirts and CDs that they signed that we're going to give away during their interview this week, so look out for that Potluck interview this week as well. It's going to be a great Independence Day week right here on NORML's Daily Audio Stash. Let's make sure that you show your true patriotism and change the senseless marijuana prohibition in this country. Make this week be the week that you get involved. All you got to do is visit norml.org to get involved today. On the Audio Stash today, we've got a couple of executive directors. First, we're going to hear from Executive Director Chris Crane at Students for Sensible Drug Policy about changes SSDP has been working very hard on with the Higher Education Act. We all know that an unfortunate number of American students get denied federal financial aid because of minor marijuana convictions. Well, that could change very quickly. Chris Crane's going to join us to talk about those changes here today. Also, Alan St. Pierre was in London just a couple of weeks ago, meeting with the oldest marijuana law reform organization that's based out of England. And Alan has an interesting weigh-in on that, a report from Executive Director Alan St. Pierre here today on NORML's Daily Audio Stash. Also got some great music from the Independent Online Distribution Alliance. Stay tuned here today and all this week, this Independence Day week, for great Audio Stash episodes. And check out our website at normalaudiostash.com to catch up on shows you might have missed.
You're listening to NORML's Daily Audio Stash.
One of the harshest realities of modern marijuana prohibition stems from provisions of the Federal Higher Education Act. As many of you know, tens of thousands of potential college students, or those already in school, have lost their federal financial aid because of a minor marijuana possession offense. There's almost no chance that most of these students can pursue their college education without this important form of financial aid. Perhaps most disturbing is that those who are convicted in America of violent crimes, even sex crimes such as rape, are not stripped of their financial aid in the same manner as harmless marijuana smokers. The nonprofit Students for Sensible Drug Policy has sought to change the Higher Education Act so that this loophole can be closed, and this mass of young people seeking their degree, wanting to better themselves and their communities, can again be in school regardless of minor marijuana offenses. The good news today is that the hard work of SSDP and other organizations such as NORML seems to be paying off. Joining us today to discuss this issue further is the Director of Students for Sensible Drug Policy, Chris Crane. Chris, welcome back to the Audio Stash today.
Thanks for having me back again.
Hey, Chris, great to have you on the program as always here. Now, tell us about the major development going on with the Higher Education Act.
Sure. Well, just a little bit of background for those who are not familiar with the issue. Back in 1998, the last time that the Higher Education Act was reauthorized, Congress included a provision that essentially prohibits students from receiving financial aid if they have a drug conviction on their records. It removes their eligibility for financial aid if they're convicted of a drug offense. Right now, Congress is in the process of reauthorizing the entire Higher Education Act for the first time since 1998 when this provision was put in place. Now, the Senate has been the first chamber to take this up, and the initial bill just was voted out of the Senate HELP Committee, which is the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee. In that committee, it included language that would essentially repeal this provision. It wouldn't repeal it outright, but it would expressly prohibit the Department of Education from asking about a student's drug conviction history on the FAFSA form, which is the form you fill out to get financial aid, or any other financial reporting forms. So it basically makes the provision completely unenforceable. This provision, this bill has now passed, as I mentioned, the Senate HELP Committee, and is now making its way to the full Senate.
And Chris, this Senate committee, it's got some of the highest profile elected officials on it, including a few presidential candidates.
That's correct. In fact, it had 3 presidential candidates, all of them Democrats, serving on the committee. Senators Clinton, Obama, and Dodd are all members of the HELP Committee. And
Chris, having these presidential candidates work on this as part of their Senate work, do you think issues like this could make it into the presidential campaign arena?
I think these are issues, generally, drug war issues overall are issues that the presidential candidates kind of want to shy away from. Unfortunately, the mainstream media has not had the fortitude to ask the candidates about this. So it's nice when they're actually forced to take a position on an issue through a vote in Congress. Now, to be perfectly honest about this and fair, these presidential candidates didn't have to vote on the drug question specifically, the financial aid question specifically. This was one provision in a much larger bill that they voted forward. However, our indications from their staffers, in response to the letters that we generated, showed us that all three of those presidential candidates who served in the committee supported repealing the provision. So that's a very positive sign.
And because this group of influential and powerful senators worked on this and made these recommendations, Chris, is there a sense that this is enough momentum to have these changes pass through in full?
It's highly likely, yes, in the Senate at least. Unless a senator were to introduce an amendment that would, gut that provision, it's likely to pass overall. And even if an amendment were to be introduced, we would very likely have the votes to defeat it. So we're extremely optimistic that this language is going to make it all the way through the full Senate. The next question is, what is the House going to do?
And should these changes be made to the Higher Education Act, what kind of impact will it have and how soon?
It will have a huge impact. To date, approximately 200,000 students have been denied financial aid as a result of a drug conviction. Now, many of those students are already re-eligible for financial aid because of a change in the provision that happened last year when Congress essentially removed the reach-back effect of the provision, meaning that students who have prior convictions on their records became re-eligible for financial aid. Until last year, if you had a conviction on your record when you were, say, 18 or 19 years old, if you decided to apply for financial aid when you were 40 or 45 years old, that conviction would cause you to be ineligible for aid. That's no longer the case. It now applies to students who are receiving financial aid at the time of their conviction. However, that's still, according to our estimates, we're still talking about tens of thousands of students here who will be ineligible for financial aid unless this provision is repealed. So if Congress, if the House follows suit, and what we've been hearing from our sources on the Hill is that the House is actually likely to go even farther and repeal the provision outright. So if Congress adopts either the Senate language or the House language, tens of thousands of students are going to be re-eligible for financial aid who likely would not have been able to pay for college otherwise. This would make it so that the Senate language, as I mentioned, would make it so that the Department of Education is not allowed, they're prohibited from asking about a student's drug convictions on any financial reporting forms or financial aid forms. So it makes the law completely unenforceable. And the House, from what we've been hearing, is likely to include language that would simply repeal this provision from the Higher Education Act altogether. It wouldn't just make it unenforceable, it would make it cease to exist. So these students who were ineligible, who are currently ineligible, if either of these languages end up as the law in the end, these students will now be eligible to receive financial aid and are going to be able to go back to college.
And is there any reason in particular as to why the Senate committee looked at this now, when college is out for the summer and the student activism is sort of on hold on vacation?
This just happens to be the time when the Senate is finally taken up the Higher Education Act reauthorization. I don't think it has anything to do with the fact that it's summer. I think it has to do with the fact that this is when in the calendar this was scheduled for. For instance, in the House, the House has yet to take up HA reauthorization, and they very well might not until the fall when school's back in session. So this is an issue that was supposed to have been dealt with by law. It was supposed to have been dealt with by 2005. The Higher Education Act is mandated to be reauthorized every 5 to 7 years. The last time it was done was in 1998. So Congress was supposed to have taken care of this 2 years ago. They simply never got around to it. And this wasn't the only bill that the Republican-controlled Congress didn't get around to dealing with. And so this Congress is currently going through a whole number of spending bills and authorization bills that were supposed to have been done over the last 2 or 3 years. So it just so happens that this is the time that they've chosen to deal with it. I don't think it has anything to do with the school being out of session.
Righto. Now the next big round of financial aid applications will happen in the fall. Could all of this change by then?
Well, the next round would be for this coming fall. We're basically talking about the end of August here. So I'd say it's unlikely that both the Senate and the House are going to pass their bills and have them be reconciled in a conference committee and signed by the president. I think it's very unlikely that's going to happen by the end of the summer. It's possible, but I certainly wouldn't hold my breath. I think it's much more likely that this is going to be dealt with by the end of the year, in which case it would impact students who are applying applying for financial aid for next spring semester, the spring 2008
Righto,
semester.
Chris. Well, thank you again for joining us here today on the Audio Stash to discuss this. I look forward to having you back to discuss this issue further in the future and other things SSDP is working on. Chris, thanks again.
Not a problem, and thanks as always for having me.
Chris Crane is the Executive Director of Students for Sensible Drug Policy in Washington, D.C. You can visit their website at ssdp.org and also schoolsnotprisons.com. We have links to both sites up on our own at normalaudiosstash.com.
The National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws, known as NORML, has worked for over 30 years to change the misguided cannabis prohibition that has been a scourge to the public health and safety of our nation. NORML's efforts are highlighted by frequent legal and legislative success, creating the growing dialogue with elected officials and law enforcement. For more information about marijuana and to find out what you can do to help end prohibition, contact the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws at norml.org or toll free at 888-67-NORML.
Next up today, we've got a report from NORML's Executive Director, Alan St. Pierre. Alan traveled to London recently for a marijuana conference, and he brought back this comparison between the U.S. and the U.K. when it comes to cannabis, especially when it comes to medical cannabis.
In viewing two Occidental, law and order countries' experiences with medicinal cannabis, such as America and the United Kingdom, unobvious comparisons and disturbing contrasts come to the fore. Both countries banned the production, sale, and possession of cannabis decades ago. America will celebrate the 70th year of cannabis prohibition this August 2nd. And both countries now grapple with the very gray area created by the natural right of human self-preservation and an untenable prohibition law when licensed physicians recommend whole smoke cannabis to their sick, dying, or sense-threatened medical patients. Our national governments are faced with a true dilemma. Continue the policy of arresting, prosecuting, and in America, incarcerating bona fide medical patients for following their physician's medical advice, hardly a demonstration of compassionate conservatism, or create a functional and accountable medical cannabis distribution system that our currently prohibition-inclined countries will embrace. From a public policy point of view, this is hardly rocket science, as Canada, great friend and ally to both the United States and the United Kingdom, while prohibiting non-medical cannabis use, allow registered patients to receive cannabis via the government's postal service, just as they can thousands of other medicinal compounds. No kid stealing the mailed product, no diversion. Essentially, there's no big deal. The question of medicinal cannabis currently is much more politically pressing in America, as 12 of the 50 states, or approximately 20% of America's population, reside in a state or municipality that have substantively parted ways with the federal government since the mid-1990s in passing voter initiatives or legislation in favor of medicinal access to cannabis. In some U.S. states, notably the most influential one, California, medicinal cannabis patients readily purchase cannabis and hashish products over the counter from any one of the state's reported 350 to 400 private medical marijuana dispensaries or patient cooperatives. Estimates of annual sales for quasi-legal medicinal cannabis in the state exceed $1 billion a year. With recent approval in the state assembly, New York may soon become the 13th state to adopt pro-medical cannabis legislation, which, in effect, means that a bellwether state, such as New York, will likely provide the necessary tipping point for amending decades-old and misguided federal legislation. Despite groundbreaking support by the House of Lords for commercial research into medicinal cannabis in 1998, under the guise of UK-based business interest GW Pharmaceuticals, unlike in America, medicinal cannabis consumers in the United Kingdom enjoy no legal protections, there is no legal or quasi-legal or local access of medicinal cannabis for patients, and there is no genuine stakeholder community that works cohesively and effectively to pass affirming legislation or public initiatives. Maybe more disturbing to pro-cannabis law reform policy wonks is a recent wave of hysterical, reefer madness-induced stories in the British press that hark back to the 1930s American yellow journalism baron William Randolph Hearst's original and largely successful vilification of cannabis. Today, purposely or not, numerous media outlets in the United Kingdom are pursuing a similar agenda to that of Hearst by attempting to convince the British public that today's cannabis is an altogether different beast, a more potent, psychotic-inducing, and addictive substance than the reasonably benign one that helped power our two countries' social and creative revolutions of the 1960s. Government documents and biographies later revealed Hearst working hand in glove with the U.S. government, seeking to create public hysteria regarding a utilitarian, mildly psychotropic plan. One has to wonder, what is today's impetus for so many in the United Kingdom press to reinvigorate the long bygone and discredited days of reefer madness? Where Hearst sought to vilify cannabis, Indian hemp, turning the plan into the decidedly foreign-sounding to American ears marijuana, in modern England today, irresponsible media outlets are now parroting Hearst's cannabis demonization by regularly referring to cannabis as skunk and ascribing Hearstian headlines of the plant's supposed effect on its consumers. To wit, cannabis psychoses off your head. Observer, February 2006. Marijuana linked to stabbing murders. Herald Sun, July 2006. Cannabis downgrading blamed for psychotic killer gangs. Daily Telegraph, April 2007. Boy on skunk cannabis butchered a grandmother. Daily Mail, April 2007. While America's medicinal cannabis policies cause great tension between states and the federal government, when asked by the Portland Press Herald in Maine, whilst running for president, about the increasing number of states deviating from federal policies banning medical cannabis, candidate George Walker Bush replied, quote, "I strongly support states' rights, but if elected, will rigorously enforce federal laws," unquote. At least our media takes a somewhat neutral stand on the policy of medicinal cannabis and is not retarding progress of stakeholders to include cannabis in its rightful place in today's pharmacopoeia. However, it seems unlikely to me that the British government, anytime soon, is going to embrace a medicinal cannabis distribution program outside of the House of Lords created monopoly conveyed exclusively unto GW Pharmaceuticals, as long as some major British media outlets continue down the reckless and genuinely scurrilous path of attempting to harden citizens' attitudes against any modicum of cannabis law reform, even medicinal access for patients, through a non-scientific, illogical, and fear-mongering campaign to make the palliative and enjoyable cannabis plant into a psychotic and murder-inducing skunk. From Washington, D.C., this is Alan St. Pierre, Executive Director of NORML, the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws.
the group No More Babylon with Freedom. Here on NORML's Daily Audio Stash today, that track found up at the Independent Online Distribution Alliance. I have links to it at normalaudiostash.com. Very good stuff to go along with Alan's report. You can contact Alan St. Pierre directly for any questions you have about cannabis policy. You can reach Alan via email at foundation@normal.org.
Hey, is it 420 yet? This is Rick Cusick from High Times Magazine, and you're tuned into NORML's Audio Stash.
I'm going to round out the Audio Stash today with this excellent spoken word track I found at the Independent Online Distribution Alliance. The artist is Genesee. The album is called The Years of My Life, the book. The record label is Noble House Records, and again found up at the Independent Online Distribution Alliance. This track is called Me and Julio Down by the Schoolyard, but it's certainly not a retake of the classic song. This is an original piece, and I'm a big fan of spoken word from Ani DeFranco to Allen Ginsberg on to slam poetry competitions, and I really like this one.
First time I met Paulie, he was walking towards me with a basketball in one hand and a Corona in the other. I just moved from Queens to Brooklyn into my Aunt Beth's basement apartment in Bay Ridge, USA. So naturally, like every other teenage New Yorker during the Michael Jordan era, I immediately located the closest hoop and spent hours in the park perfecting my jump shot in my left hand. Paulie introduced himself first, we started shooting around a little, but before I knew it, we were engaged in a full-on, all-out, one-on-one free-for-all, talking so much about the other's mother, you would think our families have known each other for years. Back and forth we went, the sun went down, still balling like Machiavelli. If one of us never mentioned the word blunt, we probably would have played till the sun came up. Off we went to 91st and 4th Ave, bought a Philly for 25 cents, chopped in for a nickel bag of weed, and hit the roof of the 12-story building that Dave, the Anything You Need dealer, lived in. You can see the street lights of 4th Ave looking like a big runway at LaGuardia, going all the way to 65th Street in the Towers. See, Bay Ridge was one of those neighborhoods that was still a neighborhood in Brooklyn in 1990. We had the local butcher, the local candy store, pizza shop, hardware store, supermarket, donut shop, diner, barn, deli, all the same, exactly untouched since the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and the 80s. Predominantly Irish and Norwegian neighborhood at the time. Bay Ridge is at the foot of the Verrazano Bridge, which stretches across the Narrows like a fishing pole cast on the tail of a rabbit. That rabbit is Staten Island, which leads to Jersey, which leads to Philly, which leads to Miami, which leads to Cuba, etc. You get the point. Bay Ridge also borders Bensonhurst, which is a strictly Italian neighborhood known for the mobs, drugs, gambling, protection, and all that crazy shit. We finish off the Bermuda Triangle because people could get lost for lifetimes in the most bar-populated blocks in the world. Was the Sunset Park border. Mostly Puerto Rican and Dominican. Gunset was the hood. Crazy shit happened there every day. This one got shot, this one got killed, this one got beef with this one. That's where a lot of the drama went down. So here we are, stuck in between the madness with the force of gravity pulling us towards the edge of the roof, of the hood, of the city, of the world. Me and Paulie click instantly. We smoked that blunt like it was the first blunt we ever smoked and the last one we were going to. We had those incredible times that can never be replaced. Those days as a kid when the only thing that mattered was the very second you were in. The moment, the fighting, the going to clubs in Manhattan, bringing girls to the empty apartments in Paulie's building that his father was a super of, playing ball till 4 in the morning, the drinking, smoking, partying, cutting school. It was all great till Paulie stopped hanging out as much and started selling crack on 49th Street. Fucked up part about it, that I had to hear about it from the whole neighborhood before I caught it myself. That was the first friend I lost to that shit, but it wasn't the last. Before I knew it, Paulie was using it, on the run from drug dealers in Rikers Island and out of my life.
That was the artist Genesee off his album The Years of My Life, the book, spoken word. Found up at the Independent Online Distribution Alliance. We have links to the album you just heard up on our website at normalaudiostash.com. listening to NORML's Daily Audio Stash, the growing truth about cannabis. Make sure you visit our website at normalaudiostash.com. That's NORMLAUDIOSTASH.com for more information about every day's show. I'm your host, Chris Goldstein. Thanks for listening today. See you at 4:20 tomorrow. The podcasting technology of NORML is made possible by Red Aphid Interactive Media. More information at redapphid.com.